Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie's wife, a physical therapist, was fired and sued for an inappropriate relationship with a patient she was caring for. The patient was also married, and his wife was the one suing. He was devastated and decided to separate from his wife. He later moved on, sold their house, bought a new one on a farm, adopted a 10-year-old child, and started giving horseback riding lessons. He feels they've become a better person after the failed marriage and is content with the outcome. Now let's get into the story. When our marriage came to an end, my wife was 37, working as a physical therapist for 5 years. I was 35. We were married for 11 years. We were both content without bringing children into the world. We just started going through the process of becoming adoptive parents, but that would never happen for us. I was proud of her for how hard she worked. She loved her job, and I never expected her to do anything she'd be ashamed of. One day, she came home early. I was off work that day for some reason, and she looked devastated. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it right away. When she did talk to me, it was like she rehearsed what to tell me. She said her boss noticed she had accumulated a large amount of vacation time. She pretty much ordered her to take a paid vacation. I didn't understand what was so sad about that, but I didn't know my wife loved her job and felt restless at home. She usually cleaned or kept herself busy when she had to be home, but this time she stayed in bed. She could barely move. I knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't talk to me. I got the mail and found something alarming. It was a letter to my wife, explaining the reason for her immediate termination. I was shocked. I ran on to find that not only was she fired, she was being sued in court. I was so confused. What was happening? I walked like a zombie into her bedroom, finding my wife lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I threw the papers at her and asked for an explanation. Once she gathered them up, she started hyperventilating. Once she calmed down, she probably figured I was going to find out anyway, so she told me what happened. Once she calmed down, she probably figured I was going to find out anyway, so she told me what happened. 8 months ago, she'd gotten a patient to work with who was in a dirt bike accident. He was learning how to walk again, basically, and couldn't use his hands for anything either. She had fed him, spoke with him, and really gotten to know him. She helped him to go to the bathroom and shower, and when he asked her to help him with something else that wasn't allowed, she did. I was instantly heartbroken. She was mine, and I was hers. By helping this guy, she sacrificed her career and marriage. What's worse is he was married too. His wife was the one suing my wife and her employer, maybe because he felt bad about it and told her. I couldn't believe it. She begged me to stay with her because she needed me now more than ever. She didn't love AP, she knew that. She just felt bad for him as his caretaker. I reminded her that the vows we took meant she would be my wife and only help me with things like that. The same was expected of me for her. She took advantage of the trust she had as a physical therapist and had intimate with her vulnerable patient. For all I knew, she instigated it. She just admitted she spoke with him and got to know him well. Was that her way of telling me she fell in love? His wife didn't deserve this betrayal either, probably while she stood by his side during the long recovery. My wife had a very hard time ahead of her, but I wasn't going to make it any easier. I moved out, waiting for all this to settle before I filed for divorce. After she was found guilty and in a whole heap of trouble, it was easy for me to win more favor. She owes a ton of money and can no longer practice physical therapy. I don't know how or if she's moved forward in life. She called everyone she ever met or came in contact with to ask for help and was met with a ton of rejections and criticism. She pretty much fell off the face of the earth after that. I don't know if she managed to pay off all that money or if she was arrested. I never wanted to look into it and find out. By the time I could move back into our house, it was like a tomb of old memories, frozen in a time when nothing was wrong. It was scary. I had help from friends and family to get rid of all that stuff and put the house up for sale. With the profits from that, I bought a nicer house on land with horses. I grew up with horses, so it really feels like home. I also decided I wanted my home, horses, and self to become a haven for a child in need. Since my wife abandoned me before we were able to adopt, I did it myself. I adopted a 10-year busy living life on a farm, and with my daughter's help, I give horseback riding lessons. It's like I've lived more than one life and become a better person after my failed marriage. I'm proud I made it through, and I'm happy my ex suffered through the reality of her choice. Today's second story. OP recounts a painful experience from 2 years ago when he discovered his wife's infidelity with a friend. Despite what he believed was a happy marriage, he caught him and his wife cheating during a gathering at their home. After a series of confrontations and discovering explicit texts and images on his wife's phone, he decided to file for divorce. The divorce was challenging, but he ultimately severed ties with both of them. While reflecting on his experience, he emphasizes the importance of loyalty in relationships and advises others to be cautious about the people they surround themselves with. Now let's get into the story. My situation happened about 2 years ago and I can still remember it like yesterday. I believe that me and my ex could be a shining example of a great couple, but we were anything but that. In the end, my story is a very serious one because of loyalty. I'd been noticing a real lack of loyalty in relationships for a while now. Even though I was super loyal to my wife, she still cheated on me. 32 and my wife, 31, were married for 6 years and we were happy. As far as I could tell, we never had any real problems. Money wasn't even an issue. Even though we weren't rich, we were able to pay bills and go anywhere, and do what we wanted as long as we planned for it. She worked in an office at a child clinic and I worked in fabrication. Since I always worked with my hands, my wife was fun, outgoing, and always was my ride or die. She always made me stop and appreciate life more. Instead of working all the time, we would go and travel every year, especially since my idea of a vacation was to sit in the backyard with a drink in my hand. Thanks to her, we visited Vegas, Cancun, and visited her cousin in San Juan. This was good because I haven't lived there since I was 11 or 12 years old. It was great to have a wife who added something to my life, even though I definitely would have married her because of her looks. Her face looked just like Una Chaplin, but she had the body of the weather girl, Terry and Noah. We got along with each other's family. So we were all good as family, especially since she was the only child. Hanging out at clubs and stuff was fun, but we got to the point after a while where we enjoyed each other's company more. But apparently, I had the situation all messed up because my wife cheated on me and got suspicious during a little get-together we always have at our house, even though there was COVID. Me and my ex invited our friends to hang out with us on the weekend. We would play music, drink, and play card games on Saturdays. Since the clubs weren't open and there were no concerts, our close friends hung out at our place. It had become a regular thing, especially since we had all the alcohol. This night, though, after playing spades, one of my friends challenged another friend of mine to play me in a game of Texas Hold'em. This friend, let's just call this guy Rome, was super anxious to play me. This guy was working at the same job as my other friend, and that's how we got to know each other. Rome was the type that was flashy and braggadocious, and we all would have to bring his mind out of the clouds sometimes. And the game of Texas Hold'em would do this because he never beat me one-on-one before. At the time, we recently learned how to play it, thanks to his uncle. Even though we weren't that good, I always would beat him, and for some reason it aided him. He lost me 7 times straight, and the last time he was talking shit a little too personal. He'd talk about having a better car than me, a better house than me, but he would act bitter about my winning streak. At first, I didn't want to play, but thanks to the hecklers, Rome insisted that we play. Sure enough, when we played, I ended up beating him twice. Pissed off, he wanted to play again, but I said that my ex and her friends wanted to play dominoes and had said we should stop. My ex jumped in and agreed, but he wanted to play one more game. He offered to put up a play again. And when I still said no, he upped it to 150. After this, my friend started heckling me, saying it was easy money. I don't gamble because I know my luck, but I decided to play for the money. Even though we don't put up any real money. It turns out he actually beat me and I ended up losing $150. He jumped out of his seat and got in the face of our friend who was heckling him to gloat. They got into a heated argument and we had to break them up for a while. After a handshake, Rome told me he really didn't want my money and declined when I said I was still going to pay him. When my ex came in from the kitchen, Rome told her he won and she seemed surprised and happy for him. After giving him a hug, she told us it was time for her and her friends to play dominoes. The rest of the night, we didn't have any more problems. The only thing we had to deal with was him still gloating. When everybody was leaving, I was talking to my best friend Rich in our driveway. Standing there with him, I was able to see through the window of our house and see Rome talking to my ex. At first I didn't think that anything was wrong and thought he was still gloating. But then I saw him pull her by her waist to him and put his forehead to hers. After a second, she walked back into our living room and he followed her out. This bothered me so much that Rich asked me what was wrong. Since his back was kind of turned to it and he missed what I saw, I said nothing and I told him to get home safe. After everybody left, my mind couldn't get off what I saw. While cleaning up, I tried to rationalize it by saying they're friends too, and that she was just happy for him, that he won. But knowing how Rome was with women, that excuse I had only lasted a day. The next day, what I saw ate at my mind. I've never been the jealous type of guy, but it did make me nervous and I had to get doubt out of my mind. That night after we went to bed, I stayed up until 2 in the morning when I knew she was asleep sliding out of the bed. I took her phone and took my phone too. Taking our phones to the living room, I called my brother Juan. My ex had a lock on her phone and I knew the only one who could get me in it was Juan. I called him about 7 times and he finally picked up, sounding really annoyed. He asked me what I wanted. I told him to do me a favor and call her phone for me. He asked me why and I told him I would tell him later. And after hanging up, he found her number and called it. After answering it real quick, I went in her text and it totally broke me. There were a bunch of texts about him screwing her for about a year, and it was even worse than that. This guy was sending her videos of him stroking his private parts, and she once sent him back a pic with her mouth open and her tongue out. There were at least 7 or 8 pictures of him exposing himself and I had to scroll away. I was so mad that I almost threw her phone across the room. My world was officially turned upside down, and though I was really going through it, I knew what I had to do. After getting some screenshots, I sent them to my phone and I put her phone back on the charger. I decided to sleep on the couch because I definitely wasn't sleeping with her. I was already planning how I wanted to get the hell out of this betrayed spouse marriage. The next morning, when we were getting ready for work, my ex asked me why I didn't come back to bed after I said I didn't want to. She thought I was just being a smartass and slapped me upside the head. If it wasn't so early, my ex probably would have gotten sassy with me, but just went to make her coffee to start the day. I never really went to work. I started looking for a good lawyer all day after finding one. He was expensive, but he told me the best way to get the job done. When I filed, I had to wait till she got served, and that was the hard part. Seeing her in the house, she would try to hold a conversation with me, but I failed miserably. All that I could give her was yes, no, and maybe. Talking to her was hard to do. After reading those texts, know that she went to his place after work, and if I'm hanging out with Juan, she'd invite him to our place. At first, she would tell him it was the last time. Then she would openly invite him over and text him until he did. This was an every week thing. I feel like I was lucky I had caught her. At least now I know why. She always turned me down in bed and had to promise me 6. I just couldn't wait till she got served at her job. I was ready to explode on her. And I was ready to explode on Rome too. As messed up in the head as I was ready to move on. On the day she got served, I decided to take that day off as well. My ex called me and screamed at me that she couldn't believe I just served her with divorce papers. Apparently, she got served during her lunch break like I had asked. And her friends at work saw this. They had to be the ones to tell her that they were divorce papers. I told her I was divorcing her and I needed her to look at it before she came back home. My ex hung up and I knew she was on her way back. I probably should have had a friend with me at the time, but I wasn't thinking perfectly about the situation. When she pulled up, I sent her the screenshots of her texts with Rome. The second she bust in, she was crying and screaming at me. She said she knew I was acting funny and asked how I could all of a sudden divorce her. I said she must not have gotten my text and said, check your phone. She said she wanted me to tell her, but I said, just check your phone. She looked in her phone and when she saw her own texts with Rome, she dropped the phone and put her face in her hands. She sat down on the couch, and it was my turn to start screaming at her. I called her a hoe in so many different ways and asked her how she could do this with my friend. She had this look of disbelief in her eyes and was just saying sorry without even looking at me. I got my keys and just left to go to Juan's house. After breaking all the news to Juan, I called my family and friends. I then told her mother and she relayed the message to her father who was in Florida helping a friend with his business. After sending the screenshots to Rome and telling him I was going to kick his ass if I saw him, he texted back, "I'm sorry bro." After this I had a meet up with my friends and told all of them that if they wanted to still be friends with Rome, that's cool, but I let them know that's not how I operate and I wouldn't still hang with him if it happened to them. They agreed with me and said to call if I needed them. My ex called me and said that she wanted to talk. She asked me if there was any way for us to reconcile. I told her not only did she cheat on me, but I saw that she was talking shit about me. She told him I wouldn't find out because I was wrapped around her finger and agreed with every bad thing that Rome was saying about me. She said that she was sorry and that while we were all together at our house he started flirting with her and always complimented her body. After he was getting in cool with her friends, they would hang out with Rome but she wouldn't tell me. So whenever she would go to a Drake or a Bad Bunny concert with her friends, Rome was with them. I asked her why she didn't say anything. She said because she didn't want it to look weird. After that, he started flirting with her through texts and she started flirting back then. One of the few days I was passed out drunk they started kissing and it led to them touching each other. She said one day he popped up at our house when I was out. After claiming he just wanted to talk, he had started touching her and charming her again and then he screwed her. I told her I know that she doesn't love me. And that's why there won't be any kind of reconciliation. After cursing her out again, I said don't talk to me, talk to my lawyer and hung up. I was glad we didn't have a family yet. The divorce was terrible though, mostly because of COVID she ended up getting our house, but she wasn't going to be able to keep it without my income. She had decided to sell it and moved in with her friend Dina. Rome was cut off from my other friends because he was definitely not trustworthy. I was happy about this because with both of them out of my life, I felt free. Especially in my new home I was renting for 2 years. I haven't heard from either of them. I ran into a friend of hers at a restaurant and she seemed happy to see me. When she was coming in, she spilled the tea about my ex and said she moved out of Dina's apartment and got her own place. Recently she said she missed me because she's on Tinder and it frustrates her. We both just laughed and I told her to enjoy her dinner because me and my brother were leaving. I recently broke down and checked her profile on Facebook but turned my head instantly and promised myself not to look at her Facebook page again. My ex's friend made me want to post this to say to you guys to be careful. Loyalty is important in relationships and to always know who's around you. My wife didn't love me, but she was just too selfish. Plus, she is a gorgeous woman so she was placed on a pedestal by me and honestly didn't deserve it. But knowing all this, she took advantage of my love for her. All this honestly got me back in my feelings. But I want to tell you guys you can definitely make it over this. This was hard thing to go back through, but I hope you don't lose sight of your happiness. Right now, I need a glass of Hennessy. I appreciate this community. Make money and live long.